Imagine this, friends. Let's start with a bold assumption. It is 11 p.m. right now, and you have just finished a day's work. Your body is exhausted, but your mind is unusually hyperactive. You tell yourself that you must get to sleep early tonight. You have to get up early tomorrow to hit the gym, memorize vocabulary, and finish that project you've been procrastinating on. You solemnly shut down your computer, crawl into bed, and swear not to look at your phone again. However, at this very moment, your hand seems to have a mind of its own. It inexplicably reaches toward the bedside table and lights up the screen. You tell yourself, just one glance, I'll reply to a message and then sleep. But with a slide of your fingertip, that demonic short video interface pops up. Originally intending to watch for only 5 minutes. Unknowingly, you swipe through video after video. Cats acting cute, influencers exploring shops, gaming commentaries. Your rationality seems to be hijacked in that instant. Locked away in a little black room named dopamine. You know you are wasting time, you know your eyes are sore. You know that tomorrow morning you will regret this enough to bang your head against the wall. But you just cannot stop. When you finally put down the phone and look at the time, it's already 3 a.m. That deep sense of powerlessness and self-loathing instantly drowns you. In the diary of your heart, you fiercely write down, Tomorrow I will definitely turn over a new leaf. But, friends, when the night of the second day falls, when that familiar exhaustion strikes, you pick up your phone once again. This is what we are going to talk about today: lack of self-control. That sense of powerlessness where you understand all the principles but still can't live your life well. That absurdity where you clearly want to go left, but your body honestly turns right. Don't hide. I know you are nodding in front of the screen. Because this is not just your predicament, it is also mine. It is even the predicament of all of us. Today, we have invited some of the smartest brains in human history to give this collective spiritual rickets of ours a proper medical consultation. The question to be explored in this episode is how to overcome the lack of self-control. This so-called lack of self-control. In Greek, it is akrasia. In English, it is usually translated as weakness of will, willpower weakness, or lack of self-control, or incontinence in the philosophical sense. Actually, this is a problem most of us face in our daily lives. It is simply that I cannot control myself. It is that I clearly know in principle that doing A is better than doing B. But inexplicably, in action, I just can't control myself and I do B instead of A. For example, you clearly know that you have an exam next month, and you should be studying hard today. But as you are reading the book, your hand involuntarily pulls out your phone. You open the short video app and start swiping through videos that give you fresh stimulation. And then, as you swipe, the whole day passes. Then, at night, you write in your diary with great remorse, Today I swiped through my phone all day. Tomorrow I must study hard. But the result? The next day's diary entry still says swipe through my phone all day. Or for another example, you clearly know you are getting a bit obese. Your blood pressure, blood lipids, and blood sugar are very high. You clearly know you should eat fewer sweets, right? You know this medical knowledge better than anyone. Maybe you are even a doctor or a nutritionist yourself. But the moment you encounter sweets, you just can't control your mouth. Once you start eating sweets, you can't stop. The situation caused by this lack of self-control is that we understand the principles better than anyone. We are all know-it-alls. However, we understand so many principles, yet we still cannot live this life well. This phenomenon is very common in our daily lives. It is knowing clearly what is good, but simply not being able to do it. Knowing clearly that one should quit smoking, but having weak willpower and never being able to quit. Knowing clearly that one should make a clean break with that scumbag, but he sends a text begging for forgiveness. And you find yourself waking up in his house the next day. You hurriedly order books like Willpower and The Willpower Instinct online to find a solution. But after buying the books, you read the first 2 pages and then uncontrollably go back to playing on your phone. Falling into this state of lack of self-control is really annoying. Let's just say, if I died because I was stupid, or if I died because of external factors, then if I die, right? I didn't have the ability, or I didn't have the fate, so I'd accept it. But you say I have the ability. And if I executed according to this ability, this thing would succeed. But, alas, I just don't do it. I eventually die of laziness. You could say this way of dying really makes me hate myself. I really want to resuscitate myself, and then beat myself to death right there on the spot. So speaking of this, let's limit the scope of our discussion today. Today we are only discussing the lack of self-control that you bring upon yourself when no one is stopping you and you are free of illness or disaster. So today we are not discussing, first, cases where you cannot implement the intended action due to external interference. Second, we are also not discussing lack of self-control caused by obvious pathological reasons. For example, if you have an epileptic seizure and can't control yourself. We are not discussing that today either. In that case, please dial the emergency number directly. Now someone might say, oh, how to improve self-control? This problem isn't a big problem. It's a small problem of specific operations. You just find an operation manual for improving self-control. Follow it step by step and isn't it done? Hey, the reason this problem isn't just an airport bookstore psychology bestseller problem is because it involves the question of what we actually are. Are we fundamentally rational? Or are we little monkeys who don't know ourselves and thus can't control ourselves? Can knowledge play a role in our actions? Does knowing mean doing? If it can, then how do we explain those phenomena in the world where people know but don't act? And if it can't, then do we still need to know the principles? So how do we overcome the lack of self-control and achieve the unity of knowledge and action? For this thought experiment question, this episode invites 5 philosophers to provide their diagnosis of the cause of the lack of self-control and prescribe medication based on their diagnosis. These 5 doctors are the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates, who advocates that you learn knowledge; the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who advocates becoming a philosopher; the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle, who advocates that you cultivate habits; the Scottish philosopher David Hume, who advocates moving people with emotion; and the Austrian psychologist Sigmund Freud, who advocates psychoanalysis. In the end, you will judge, in this expert consultation, which expert's plan is more reasonable. Alright, let's enter the main part of the consultation. First, let's invite the first doctor, the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates. The first 3 doctors to appear are a trio of teacher, student, and grand student. They are the famous 3 sages of ancient Greece: Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Socrates was Plato's teacher, and Plato was Aristotle's teacher. These 3 can be said to have laid the keynote of Western philosophy in the axial age of human civilization. Okay, let's first listen to the first of the 3 sages of ancient Greece, Socrates. His diagnosis of the cause of lack of self-control. Socrates' diagnosis for lack of self-control, that is, knowing clearly but not being able to do it, is ignorance. Hey, it means you say you know but you didn't do it. Actually, it's because you didn't truly know. To use the words of Socrates, virtue is knowledge. No one goes willingly toward the bad. What does this mean? It means that a person who truly knows and truly understands the principles, it is impossible for them to exhibit a state of knowing but not acting, or lack of self-control. For example, a person who truly knows the principle that studying is good, it is fundamentally impossible for them to be unable to resist swiping through their phone while studying. Knowing definitely means being able to do, to know is to act. The so-called knowing but not acting is actually due to your ignorance. It's just that you didn't truly know that studying is good. Socrates adopts this line of reasoning to argue his point. That is, good is pleasure, pleasure is good. If you think A is worth pursuing, 1, it is because you know A is good. 2, it is because it will bring you pleasure. And 1 and 2, in Socrates' view, are equivalent, they are the same thing. So if you think A is good and worth pursuing, then A can definitely bring you pleasure. Otherwise, you couldn't think A makes you unhappy, while still thinking it is worth pursuing. Wouldn't that logic be self-contradictory? People always do what they think is more pleasurable. And pleasurable things are good things. So, people always do what they think is better. Therefore, if a person does not do the truly good thing, it must be because he does not truly know that thing is good. That is to say, knowing but not acting is simply due to ignorance. Simply put, for Socrates, Laziness and stupidity are the same thing. The reason you are lazy is because you are stupid. Stupid is lazy is stupid, it's that simple. You might not be able to accept Socrates' view. Do I think that good things are things that bring pleasure? Right? I think studying is good. But when I study, I feel uncomfortable all over. On the contrary, swiping through short videos of sexy girls makes me happier. But I don't think swiping through short videos is a good thing worth pursuing. So this is what causes my separation of knowledge and action, my lack of self-control. Socrates would tell you very toughly. Good is pleasurable, pleasurable is good. As for your so-called phenomenon of lack of self-control, it's not because the pursuit of pleasure defeated the pursuit of the good. It is fundamentally because you don't know what is good. You don't have correct knowledge about the good. If you truly knew that studying is good, then studying would bring you pleasure. That is, it is fundamentally impossible for a situation to arise where you clearly know but cannot do. Knowing inevitably leads to doing, knowing but not acting is simply not knowing. So in Socrates' view, strictly speaking, the phenomenon of lack of self-control does not exist. The so-called knowing but not acting is a pseudo-problem. This set of statements by Socrates establishes a kind of rationalist ethics, called ethical intellectualism. What is ethical intellectualism? Simply put, it means that our practices, our actions, our pursuit of a good life is built upon the foundation of knowledge and reason. As for what kind of life is a good life, this matter has to be reasoned out, it has to be clarified in principle. Only then can you correctly pursue a good life. So Socrates' view on the problem of lack of self-control is a very hardline ethical intellectualism. It means if you truly figure it out in principle, you can do it. Some friends might feel that Socrates' view is a bit counterintuitive. Like, why does he have such strong confidence in knowledge and reason? Knowing means doing? Does knowledge really have such strong power? Hey, speaking of this, we have to mention the background of intellectual history. You have to know that these ancient Greek literati particularly worshipped the power of knowledge and reason. They believe that this world follows reason, which is logos. And this reason can be understood through human rationality. Therefore, a good life is applying one's own rationality to understand the reason of this world. So, the Greek literati's worship of reason and knowledge reached a very incredible level. It is precisely this worship of reason that nurtured the birth of later science. You have to know, the level of worship the Greek literati had for reason was incredible. From the perspective of other civilizations, it was abnormal, right? Other civilizations were just living their lives normally, being very pragmatic, right? But this bunch of Greeks wanted to explore the essence of nature. What is the origin of the world? What is the unchanging essence behind the flux of all things? And they wanted to explore these big questions by reasoning. Isn't this having nothing better to do after eating full? Right? Later, the Romans came to rule Europe. The Romans also lived their lives normally. Until the Renaissance. Which birth was the Renaissance rebirthing? It was reviving the rational spirit of ancient Greece. We know the stories that followed. Modern science was born during the Renaissance. Actually, it shouldn't be called born, it existed starting from ancient Greece. So now that we live in an era of prosperous science, don't think that science and reason are just self-evident. Science and reason are not normal. They were caused by the ancient Greek literati worshipping reason like they were crazy. Okay, having said this background of intellectual history, we can roughly understand why Socrates would make such a hardline assertion of ethical intellectualism. Hey, in the eyes of Greek philosophers, knowledge is just that important. True knowing leads to true doing. If you can't do it, it's just because you didn't truly know. Okay, having finished Socrates' diagnosis of the cause of lack of self-control, let's introduce the prescription he prescribed. Since Socrates doesn't even admit that there is lack of self-control in the strict sense, the so-called knowing but not acting is just because you didn't truly know. And so-called laziness is stupidity. Then how do you cure your lazy cancer? It is to improve your level of knowledge. We still have to keep learning. When you become a person with a high level of knowledge, you will be able to truly understand the principles you know. When you truly understand these principles, putting these principles into action will be a very easy and pleasant thing. Regarding the prescription for how to overcome lack of self-control, Today we are only discussing the concept, not specific operational methods. That is, specifically how to study, how to improve one's level of knowledge. We won't go into detail about the technical operations today. Some friends might ask, I watched this episode just to know the specific operational methods to overcome lack of self-control. What's the use of you talking to me about concepts? Hey, knowing the concept is still very important. This is just like, although a lot of information now can be found through search engines or AI tools, and you don't need to memorize it by rote. But first, you have to know how to search. For example, which keywords to search for and which direction to search in. Similarly, knowing the concept of overcoming lack of self-control is like letting us know how to search. For example, you first have to know that the concept Socrates gave for overcoming it is to improve your level of knowledge. Then you will know that what you need to search for next are technical matters on how to learn knowledge efficiently. Okay, having introduced Socrates' diagnosis and prescription. Next, let's invite the next doctor, Plato. You know, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. These three sages of ancient Greece were actually all ethical intellectualists. They all believe that how we lead a good life in action is built upon the foundation of reason and knowledge. Therefore, in a certain sense, they all agree with Socrates' assertion. That is, knowing means being able to do, so-called knowing but not acting is just not truly knowing. However, the ethical intellectualism thrown out by Socrates earlier was too hardline. It belongs to a kind of strong ethical intellectualism. That kind of strong ethical intellectualism inevitably runs counter to common sense. It is counterintuitive and incompatible with the phenomena we encounter in daily life. Right? Socrates fundamentally doesn't admit the existence of the phenomenon of knowing but not acting. But after all, in our real life, there really exists the phenomenon of clearly knowing but not being able to do. You, Socrates, can't just dismiss it with knowing but not acting means I really know. Hey, so Plato and Aristotle, who appear next? The work they want to do is saving the phenomena. That is to dilute Socrates' strong ethical intellectualism. Make it more grounded, more able to explain the phenomena we encounter in daily life, so as to give a more relevant prescription. Okay, let's first listen to Plato's diagnosis of the cause. Socrates believed that the reason people want a thing is because they know in principle that this thing is good. But Plato diluted this hardline stance. He added analysis with finer granularity. Plato believed that sometimes, the reason people want a thing might have nothing to do with knowledge and principles, but is merely out of desire. Speaking of this, we have to introduce the famous theory of the tripartite soul proposed by Plato. This tripartite soul refers to the structure of the human mind being composed of three parts. First is reason, second is spirit, or translated as passion, and third is desire. The object that the reason part of the soul cares about is reasoning. That is knowledge and inference. The object that the spirit part of the soul cares about is honor. That is winning, being recognized by others in society. Or what we often call respect, right? And the object that the desire part of the soul cares about is making money. And then constantly buying, eating, and playing. Pursuing comfort and living happily. Of course, Plato's theory of the tripartite soul was proposed in his masterpiece The Republic. This is also a work of political philosophy. In Plato's view, the structure of a person's soul is isomorphic to the political structure of a city-state. Philosophers are people whose souls are dominated by reason. They love wisdom and seek truth. They are the most knowledgeable and reasonable people. Warriors and nobles are people whose souls are dominated by spirit. They all value honor, seek honor, want to win, and have a sense of superiority. In the broad masses of common people, their greatest pursuit is to buy. How do we explain the problem of lack of self-control according to this tripartite soul? If your soul structure is dominated by reason dominates spirit and desire, then this is a state of self-control. This is the philosopher-style soul structure, corresponding to city-state politics. This city-state is ruled by the most reasonable people, that is, philosophers as kings. Then this city-state where the most reasonable people are kings achieves the best political structure. That is the ideal republic. But if it's reversed, that is, if the masses collude with the warrior class, and conversely tyrannize reason, right? That is, the army is not controlled by the philosopher king, then this city-state is going to have trouble. Reflected in the human soul structure, it is desire colluding with spirit to conversely dominate reason, making the principles you clearly know and reason unable to function. This causes you to fall into a state of lack of self-control. That is, you clearly know and reason that you should study today, but the desire to swipe through short videos and watch sexy girls makes your reason malfunction. Plato used another metaphor to explain the relationship between reason and desire. It is said that reason is equivalent to the charioteer driving the horses on a chariot, and the two horses in front of the chariot correspond to spirit and desire. When spirit and desire listen to the charioteer's command, "Hey, the soul is harmonious," this is the situation of self-control. But when the horses don't listen to the charioteer's orders, that is a disharmonious soul, and trouble will arise. The situation where one cannot control oneself appears. Okay, to summarize Plato's diagnosis of lack of self-control, it is when your reason is overshadowed by desire. The principles your reason knows, therefore, malfunction and cannot be implemented in action. Okay, having introduced the diagnosis given by Plato, now it's time to prescribe the medicine. So since the cause of lack of self-control is desire colluding with spirit to conversely tyrannize reason, then to overcome lack of self-control is to let reason restore its dominant position. That is, to cultivate oneself into a philosopher-style soul structure. Simply put, how to overcome lack of self-control means becoming a philosopher. You have to know, in Plato's philosophy, there is a thick philosopher supremacism. Of course, this is consistent with the crazy worship of knowledge and reason by the ancient Greek literati we mentioned before. Since knowledge and reason are the best things in the world, then the most knowledgeable people in the world, the philosophers, are the best people. Philosophers are the wisest, most excellent, happiest, and easiest to get along with. This kind of person should be king, right? As mentioned before, a city-state where the best person is king is the best city-state. The logic is very self-consistent. So, for this best person, the philosopher, his desires are completely shielded by reason. Smart reason occupies the high ground. He can completely control himself. So surely the problem of lack of self-control won't appear. So specifically, how do you cultivate a philosopher? In Plato's view, the children of the common people have no hope. They can't be cultivated, they don't have the ability. We select suitable ones from the children of warriors and nobles to cultivate. First, you have to stimulate spirit through physical education classes. With spirit, one won't be weak-willed. But at the same time, music classes are needed to regulate spirit. Finally, making spirit form an alliance with reason. Letting spirit be used by reason. Then, you have to take cultural classes. These cultural classes are to raise your cognitive level from being limited to the cognition of concrete things to the cognition of abstract things. Learning mathematics is a very good entry point. You first have to learn algebra, then plane geometry, solid geometry. After learning math, you have to learn astronomy. And at the very end, you have to learn dialectics. Once dialectics is mastered, you can become a philosopher. Plato explicitly pointed out that the philosopher's soul is in a completely harmonious state. That is, spirit and desire are completely dominated by reason. It is fundamentally impossible for this philosopher to have problems of lack of self-control due to the tyranny of carnal desires. The philosopher acts entirely based on reason. Now someone might question this. Philosophers are aloof, philosophers are amazing. Are philosophers not mortals? Can philosophers really achieve not eating the food of common mortals? When philosophers see sexy girls in short videos, do they completely lack that secular desire? Plato would answer you firmly. Yes, philosophers just don't have that secular desire. This is not to say that Plato's so-called philosophers are robots. It's not saying philosophers have no desires. Philosophers also have desires. It's just that philosophers experience a stronger, more lasting desire. The erotic love for knowledge. You have to know, in Plato's philosophy, including the philosophy of the three sages of ancient Greece we are talking about today, there is such a setting. That is philosophical hedonism. It says that the pleasure brought by knowledge is the greatest pleasure in the world. So the meaning of the ancient Greek word for philosophy is philosophia, loving wisdom. The philosopher's greatest erotic love is the love for wisdom. That is the desire for knowledge. Everyone knows that seeking knowledge is also a form of erotic desire. And it is the kind of desire that makes people most ecstatic. This is equivalent to saying that for a philosopher, knowledge is a kind of pornography. Seeking knowledge and reasoning will attract you like pornography, making you addicted to learning, unable to extricate yourself. This seeking of knowledge can make you enter an ecstatic state of sudden enlightenment, epiphany, and connection with eternity. The pleasure experienced in this state is much happier than eating delicacies from land and sea or swiping videos of sexy girls. Once you have experienced this high-level pleasure, then the pleasure brought by eating delicacies and swiping videos of sexy girls isn't so appetizing. You will no longer be fettered by the pleasure brought by these low-level desires. This is just like what Plato said in the allegory of the cave in the Republic. That is, once you have walked out of the cave and seen what the real world looks like outside, you are unwilling to descend back into the cave, to fight with the prisoners in the cave pointing fingers at fake shadows. Now someone will ask, since philosophy makes people so happy, why do we rarely see people in reality addicted to learning and unable to extricate themselves? The answer is they can't get addicted, they don't have that ability. You have to know, being addicted to seeking knowledge requires training. Just as we said before, you need to train and harmonize spirit through music and physical education. Then through a whole set of dialectical training, you can become a philosopher. Can you become a person who experiences knowledge as pornography? To use the words of Confucius, like loving beauty or sex. Right? Studying is as happy as looking at sexy girls. If you had told me earlier that studying is like loving sex, then I wouldn't be sleepy. So let's go back. If we want to overcome the state of lack of self-control, knowing but not acting, we have to train ourselves into philosophers. Once we become philosophers, the principles we know and reason will become something like pornography, giving us a strong motivation to implement them. At this time, you can reach a realm similar to what the Chinese Confucius said, follow what the heart desires without transgressing what is right. The desire here, for Plato, refers to this high-level desire for seeking knowledge and reasoning. The right here, for Plato, refers to the regulations of reason. In the philosopher, reason and desire are combined into one. The philosopher acts wantonly completely according to his instinctual desires, without deliberately trying to conform to any norms at all. But the actions taken are very much in line with the requirements of reason. Only then is the unity of knowledge and action truly realized. This is the prescription Plato prescribed for overcoming lack of self-control. Okay, having finished Plato's diagnosis and prescription, next, let's invite the next doctor, Aristotle. We said before that the three sages of ancient Greece count as ethical intellectualists. It's just that Socrates' ethical intellectualism was too hardline. It was incompatible with some phenomena in our daily lives. So Plato, added the factor of desire, and made some finer grained analysis. And Aristotle, on the basis of Plato, diluted it again, gave some finer grained analysis, and made the philosophical analysis of lack of self-control more grounded. Right, in Raphael's painting The School of Athens, Plato is pointing one finger at the sky, floating in the heavens, while Aristotle is pointing one finger at the ground. Aristotle is more grounded. Right? Correct? Plato is there all day only knowing how to talk about philosopher kings. But how many people can become philosophers? So your academic market positioning belongs to a low EQ niche game. So Aristotle wants to make this niche game more grounded and more sinking market. Okay, let's listen to Aristotle's diagnosis of the cause of lack of self-control. First, like Plato, Aristotle also believes that lack of self-control is also due to the overshadowing of reason by desire. Rationally, we clearly know we have the risk of the three highs: high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high lipids, and shouldn't eat too many sweets. But desire makes us unable to control our mouths when we see sweets. And we can't stop once we eat. Aristotle describes this phenomenon of lack of self-control caused by desire overshadowing reason as a situation where you know a piece of knowledge but do not apply it. That is to say, yes, you know you shouldn't eat too many sweets. But the reason you lack self-control is because this knowledge has not been truly called up. This is like having a lot of knowledge stored in this hard drive. Including shouldn't eat too many sweets, should study hard. Should not smoke, should make a clean break with that scumbag. This knowledge is stored in the hard drive, that's right. But why did you perform the opposite action despite having this knowledge? It's because when you acted, this knowledge in the hard drive was not called into the memory. What is active in the memory is desire. And the knowledge not called into the memory is in a dormant state. Hey, why can desire grab memory from reason? What form does this struggle for memory take? This struggle for memory can be expressed through a method of logical analysis. Hey, this requires using Aristotle's specialty, the syllogism. We all know that the syllogism, this method of logical analysis, was invented by Aristotle. Of course, Aristotle also used the syllogism to analyze the cause of lack of self-control. Aristotle believed that human action and practice can also be described as a syllogism. For example, usually in your hard drive, there is stored such a practical syllogism. The major premise is, I should not eat sweets. The major premise of this syllogistic logic is a universal judgment. And the minor premise is a judgment about a specific thing. That is, the object A in front of me is a sweet. Then the major premise combined with the minor premise will necessarily deduce the conclusion. I should not eat object A. This is the logic, right? But what is the situation if you are in a state of lack of self-control? You have to know, unlike Plato, the desire Aristotle speaks of can be mixed with reason. In Aristotle's view, desire can carry the power of reason to perform reasoning. Desire can also play with syllogisms. Desire's syllogism manifests as the major premise, all sweets are delicious. The minor premise, the object A in front of me is a sweet. Then the deduced conclusion is, I want to eat object A. So when you are in a state of lack of self-control, what is really at work is desire's syllogism, not reason's syllogism. We see that desire's syllogism and reason's syllogism. Their minor premises are the same, the key difference is that the major premises are different. Right? So the mechanism by which lack of self-control occurs is that originally your hard drive stored reason's syllogism. But when you encounter the minor premise, that is, when you see a sweet in front of you, hey, at this time, desire suddenly shoots up. It snatches the major premise of the reason syllogism, causing the originally rational major premise to be tampered with into the desire major premise. Consequently, the action I want to eat sweets is deduced. So the metaphor of snatching memory we talked about before, under Aristotle's syllogism analysis, is actually snatching this major premise. This is Aristotle's causal analysis simply summarized. Knowing but not doing is because desire overshadows knowledge. Your memory, or the major premise of your practical syllogism, was snatched by desire, leaving the knowledge you know in principle in dormancy. Okay, having finished the diagnosis of the cause, next, Aristotle is going to prescribe his medicine. For Aristotle, unlike Plato, who simply and crudely gave a prescription of becoming a philosopher, Aristotle's prescription has finer granularity. He gave a system of cultivation of knowledge and action, allowing you to level up step by step fighting monsters. The highest level is the virtuous person. This word virtue, you can simply understand it as a stable quality or habit in a person. The virtuous person has already reached the realm of following what the heart desires without transgressing what is right. The next level down is the continent person. This kind of person is one where reason wins the major premise or memory in the struggle between reason and desire. The level below that is the incontinent person, is where desire snatches the major premise or memory in the struggle between reason and desire. The lowest level is the self-indulgent person. This kind of person is one who wholeheartedly wants to indulge desires. So what are the classification criteria for these four types of people? Hey, we put it into a coordinate axis and it becomes clear at a glance. The horizontal axis of this coordinate axis is no struggle at one end and struggle at the other. The vertical axis is reason in dominant position at one end, and desire in dominant position at the other end. Then the four types of people just mentioned can be placed in these four quadrants. Let's look at quadrants 2 and 3 on the left first. The continent person and the incontinent person are the same on this point. That is, internally they both experience struggle. That is, when encountering the minor premise, meaning when a sweet appears in front of them. A battle between heaven and man takes place. Should I eat this sweet or not? The difference is that the continent person is where reason wins the major premise, while the incontinent person's major premise is snatched by desire. Okay, let's look at quadrants 1 and 4. The virtuous person and the self-indulgent person are the same on this point. That is, neither of these two types of people has internal struggle. They are both very self-consistent, not conflicted at all. The virtuous person is actually the philosopher described by Plato, who follows what the heart desires without transgressing what is right, acting wantonly completely according to instinct. But the actions taken are very much in line with the requirements of reason. The self-indulgent person is the same. Internally there is also no struggle at all, and they basically don't care about conforming to any norms. But the actions taken are completely the opposite of reason. Seeing sweets means eating fiercely, seeing cigarettes means smoking fiercely. It means tormenting each other with the scumbag and staying together forever. We mentioned two types of practical syllogisms before: reason's syllogism and desire's syllogism. Actually, the self-indulgent person also has their syllogism. The major premise of this self-indulgent syllogism is, I should eat sweets. The minor premise is, the object A in front of me is a sweet. The conclusion is, I want to eat object A. We see that when the self-indulgent person encounters the minor premise. That is, when seeing a sweet in front of them. The self-indulgent person doesn't struggle at all, there is no internal conflict, they pick it up and eat it. After eating, they won't feel any sense of remorse, because this conforms to the major premise they have consistently held. They originally felt they should eat lots of sweets. So this person's inner heart is like the virtuous person, also very self-consistent. However, Aristotle believes that the self-indulgent person is the worst. They are worse than the person lacking self-control. Why? Because the person lacking self-control still has ideological struggle and still gets conflicted, although this struggle failed. But they still have a struggle. This shows that the person lacking self-control still wants to be good in their heart, right? But the self-indulgent person doesn't struggle at all because they completely don't want to be good, right? This self-indulgent person is completely letting it rot, giving up. This state of letting it rot is the worst in Aristotle's view. Let's use an example to explain. This is equivalent to you planning to learn philosophy on a short video site. The previous philosophy video finished playing. The system pushed a short video of a sexy girl to you. Then, you swiped away this sexy girl video, because rationally you thought you should quickly swipe to the next philosophy video to continue learning. Note, the physical movements of the virtuous person and the continent person are the same. Both are moving the thumb, gently swiping away the sexy girl video. However, the virtuous person swipes it away naturally, there are no waves in their heart, because they completely lack that secular desire. While the continent person, although they also quickly swiped away the sexy girl video, but within that 0.01 second of moving their thumb, their heart experienced an arduous struggle. I really want to watch the sexy girl. I really want to watch. Oh, but I can't watch. I can't watch, I have to learn philosophy. Anyway, they have to experience a struggle. This is the difference between the virtuous person and the continent person. And the difference between the continent person and the incontinent person is that after the struggle, the continent person moved their thumb, while the incontinent person's thumb seemed to malfunction and couldn't move. And the self-indulgent person actively seeks to constantly swipe through sexy girl videos. Actively searching, actively liking, actively bookmarking. Watching until they can't stop. After watching for 8 hours continuously, they still don't have any sense of remorse. Seeing the screen full of recommendations for sexy girl videos. They even smugly say, hee, big data understands me, my level 8 account is finally trained. So let's come back. According to the classification of these 4 levels of knowledge and action. First, you have to find your position accurately. Then you can level up step by step from low to high. That is, moving and leveling up from the 4th quadrant to the 1st quadrant. Actually, in the end, it is cultivating from a state where reason is overshadowed by desire to a state where reason dominates oneself in the unity of knowledge and action. Okay, having talked about the direction of cultivation. Specifically, how do you cultivate? This method of cultivation is to let knowledge truly be internalized in oneself. forming a stable quality, which is the virtue we talked about. Aristotle gave an example, saying that a person knowing clearly but not being able to do it is actually like a drunk person who can recite poetry, or an actor reciting lines, or a child reciting Tang poetry and song lyrics fluently backwards. Do they truly understand the knowledge they are reciting? They don't truly understand. In Aristotle's view, true knowing is an internalized knowledge. This knowledge seems to grow inside one's own body, forming a stable state, becoming one's second instinct, or called second nature. This is also what we often call habit becomes nature. So how do you internalize knowledge into a stable quality? On this point, the difference between Aristotle's view of knowledge and that of his teacher and grand teacher is reflected. The knowledge that Socrates and Plato believed in was more of a theoretical knowledge. It was a kind of contemplation, right? Just staying in a small study room learning mathematics, astronomy, dialectics. And then you can become a philosopher, and after becoming a philosopher, knowledge and action are unified. But Aristotle believed that the practical field of humans also follows reason. That is to say, practice is also a kind of knowledge. And the acquisition of practical knowledge is not obtained by rote memorization or hiding in a small room contemplating, but by constantly doing things to cultivate a stable habit and quality. And this point especially makes Aristotle appear more grounded than Socrates and Plato. Aristotle even specifically mocked Socrates and Plato's view of knowledge. Aristotle said, "By doing just acts, the just man is produced. By doing temperate acts, the temperate man is produced. Without doing these, no one would have even a prospect of becoming good. But most people do not do these, but take refuge in theory. They think they are being philosophers. Hey, this is doing philosophy. Thinking that by theory they will become good. This is like patients who listen attentively to their doctors, but do none of the things they are ordered to do. Just as the former will not be made well in body by such a course of treatment, the latter will not be made well in soul by such a course of philosophy. Knowledge in the practical field is internalized in one's body through constantly doing things. Knowledge obtained this way is true knowledge. Through constantly doing things, you will gradually train a kind of practical wisdom, phronesis. Simply put, it is entering a state where you can do things right without thinking. This kind of practical wisdom. It's not like arithmetic where you can reason on paper. You have to constantly do things to cultivate this kind of sense. For example, how to treat people and handle affairs correctly. You have to constantly treat people and handle affairs. Maybe you will hit a wall a few times at first. But if you treat people and handle affairs a lot, you will cultivate a sense for it. Then next time you treat people and handle affairs, you will be able to make people feel that getting along with you is very pleasant without thinking about it. To use Aristotle's words, this kind of person with practical wisdom is always able to, at the right times, with reference to the right objects, towards the right people, with the right motive, and in the right way, feel these emotions, which is what belongs to the mean and to the best. This is the quality of virtue. So let's come back. If you have this practical wisdom of doing things right without thinking, then knowledge is equivalent to growing on you, forming a second nature. Aristotle believes that a person with practical wisdom will fundamentally not experience the situation of lack of self-control. Okay, let's go back to the previous metaphor to summarize Aristotle's view. If knowing but not acting is because the knowledge stored in the hard drive was not called into the memory and was in a dormant state, then the method to make knowledge easy to call is by constantly doing things, internalizing those principles you clearly understand into yourself to become a habit. In this way, the calling of knowledge will be as smooth and free as invoking a shortcut. When you have cultivated yourself so that everything on you is this kind of reason-dominated shortcut, you have truly realized the unity of knowledge and action, realizing following what the heart desires without transgressing what is right. Okay, having finished Aristotle, finally, let's comb through the developmental clues of the views of the three sages of ancient Greece on the problem of lack of self-control. Actually, these three people are all ethical intellectualists. They all trust in the power of knowledge. Therefore, they all agree with Socrates' assertion. That is, knowing but not acting is because one does not truly know. True knowledge must be implementable. It's just that Plato and Aristotle both made explanations that are more in line with common sense. Plato added the factor of desire. Therefore, to reach true knowledge, one must let reason dominate desire. And Aristotle added the factor of practical knowledge. Therefore, to reach true knowledge, one must cultivate one's own practical wisdom. And this isn't just enough by learning theoretical knowledge. It also requires constantly doing things to cultivate a stable quality and habit. Only then can the unity of knowledge and action be achieved. Of course, saying this doesn't mean Socrates' statement was incomplete, and that the later people's statements were more complete. Because Socrates also has his reasons. Which is that this dilution later becomes muddling through, bringing in so many lower body factors to smooth things over. Then do we Greeks still want to talk about the ideal belief in pure knowledge? Right? So, which of the suggestions from these three ancient Greek experts makes more sense? You still need to make up your own mind. Okay, having introduced the views of the three sages of ancient Greece. Next, let's enter the modern era. Let's invite the Scottish philosopher David Hume. David Hume is also an old friend of this channel. He is an 18th century Scottish philosopher. He, along with Adam Smith, Francis Hutcheson, Thomas Reid, and others, led the Scottish Enlightenment. So as a modern philosopher after the Enlightenment, how would Hume view the problem of lack of self-control? Okay, let's first introduce Hume's diagnosis of the cause of lack of self-control. Hume's diagnosis of the cause of lack of self-control first must start from his critique of ethical intellectualism. Hume believed that the diagnoses of the cause of lack of self-control by the three sages of ancient Greece introduced earlier were all wrong, because the prescriptions they prescribed didn't address the symptoms at all. Fundamentally, it is because the ethical intellectualism they stood on is wrong. And we said before, this ethical intellectualism particularly emphasizes the decisive role of reason in human action, emphasizing that how we should act must be reasoned out. Only when you figure it out in principle, then can you take correct action in practice. But Hume asks, does reason really cause people's actions? Do people take an action because people first figured it out in principle? Hume does not believe that reason has any effect on human action. Hume believes that the place where reason plays a role is merely reflected in the following two aspects. One is reasoning about the relations of ideas. Two is reasoning about matters of fact. This is the so-called Hume's fork. The former, reasoning about relations of ideas, is actually mathematics and logic knowledge. For example, 2 plus 3 is equal to 5. Or if A is greater than B and B is greater than C, then A must be greater than C, right? These are purely relationships between concepts. The latter, reasoning about matters of fact, is mainly natural science knowledge, including physics, chemistry, biology, social science, etc. That is, studying the causal relationships between things. So Hume asks, of these two roles of reason, which one can mobilize us to act? Is it mathematical logic knowledge, or natural science knowledge? It's like saying you discover through observation that in this hot summer, there is a watermelon in the house. And next to this watermelon, there is a refrigerator. Then through precise calculation and reasoning, you reach a conclusion. Putting the watermelon in the refrigerator takes 3 steps in total. Step 1, open the refrigerator door. Step 2, put the watermelon in. Step 3, close the refrigerator door, right? But relying solely on these observations, calculations, and reasoning, can you deduce that you will really perform the action of putting the watermelon in the refrigerator? You cannot. What compels you to put the watermelon in the refrigerator is the emotion and desire of wanting to eat chilled watermelon. You have to know whether it is mathematical logic knowledge or natural science knowledge. These places where reason plays a role all belong to the realm of facts. That is, propositions about is. And our actions belong to propositions about ought. I know this is a watermelon, this is proposition. And I want to eat this watermelon, this ought proposition. Are completely two different things. So this explains very well why many people understand many principles and have very rich knowledge reserves, but know without acting? Because knowing and doing belong to completely different realms. Knowing cannot lead to doing. What causes our action is not reason, but emotion, passion. It's just like your wife. Nicole asks you, "Why did you choose to marry me instead of Marilyn back then?" You open your little straight man notebook. The left page writes the pros and cons of marrying Nicole. The right page writes the pros and cons of marrying Marilyn. Then after summing up, the net benefit of marrying Nicole is greater than the net benefit of marrying Marilyn. So the solution to this problem is marrying Nicole. You even shamelessly say to Nicole, "Hey wife, look how objective and rational this math problem is." If you say that, you definitely won't have a peaceful night. Don't reason with your wife. This is not to say your wife is an unreasonable person. It is to say that regarding people's actions and practices, reason doesn't get through. According to Hume's view, such an answer should be given. I don't know why either. Although rationally speaking, you are not as beautiful as Marilyn. Your figure isn't as good as hers, your education isn't as high as hers. I understand all the principles. But in my heart, there is always an inexplicable, irrational, uncontrollable emotion. I just want to be with you. Wife, I love you. Okay, let's come back. What precipitates action is not reason, but emotion. From this, Hume, contrary to ethical intellectualism, proposed an ethical sentimentalism ethics. This ethical sentimentalism emphasizes that what precipitates our actions is emotion and desire, not reason. Don't give me that crap about you and your wife having a platonic relationship. Actually, isn't it just because you were overcome by lust back then that you wanted to be with her? So what role can reason play in our actions? The role reason plays is just playing support for emotion. It's when you fall in love with Nicole. Note, you first have the emotion of falling in love with Nicole and wanting to be with her. This emotion leads you to perform the action of pursuing her. Then, your reason starts to calculate and reason whether to send Nicole roses or chrysanthemums. What strategy to adopt to successfully achieve the goal set by the emotion of wanting to be with her. Right? But no matter what strategy reason deduces, what compels you to act is your emotion. Hume said, reason is, and ought only to be the slave of the passions, and can never pretend to any other office than to serve and obey them. Thus, Hume completely inverted ethical intellectualism. According to ethical intellectualism, remember Plato's metaphor mentioned before? It is the charioteer steering and directing where the horses go. But here with Hume, the relationship is immediately reversed. It's not the charioteer controlling the horse's forward direction anymore. It is completely a husky dragging the dog walker forward. Now someone can't agree, is the status of reason so low? Reason can only be the slave of passions? That's not right. We often discover situations where reason and emotional desires conflict with each other. For example, reason tells me I shouldn't eat sweets. But emotion and desire make me unable to control my mouth and want to eat sweets. Isn't this the situation of lack of self-control mentioned by Plato and Aristotle, right? So how would Hume diagnose this so-called state of lack of self-control? Hume says, this is not reason fighting with emotion. The slave and the master cannot fight. This is emotion fighting with emotion. You can't control your mouth and want to eat sweets. Hey, this is one kind of emotion. And on the other hand, feeling that you shouldn't eat sweets. This does not come from reason, but from another kind of emotion. Here, fearing that eating too many sweets will cause illness is an emotion of fear of death. This is the two emotions of gluttony and fear of death fighting each other. Ultimately, whether you ate the sweets or not in action depends on which of these two conflicting emotions won the fight. Okay, then the question comes. What kind of emotion winning in the struggle counts as lack of self-control? Right? Why is it that if the fear of death wins, it is self-control? And if gluttony wins, it is lack of self-control? What is the standard of distinction here? Regarding this, Patrick Fleming, a philosophy professor at James Madison University, believes that on the basis of Hume's philosophy, such a dichotomy of emotional desires can be added. This way, we can distinguish what is self-control and what is lack of self-control. These two types of desires are true wants and immediate wants, want. The meaning of these two desires is literal. One is the true desire. One is just the immediate desire right before your eyes. When two emotional desires fight, if the true desire wins, it is self-control. If the immediate desire wins, it is lack of self-control. Okay, now the problem becomes how to distinguish these two desires. Didn't Hume already completely remove reason from the field of human practice? Then on what basis can we say studying is a true desire? And swiping short videos is an immediate desire? Right? On what basis do you say that me swiping short videos watching sexy girls isn't what I truly want from the bottom of my heart? You are not a roundworm in my belly. How do you know what I truly want? I don't even know what I truly want myself. Okay, let's look at a thornier case. Pay attention to this woman in the case named Kate. Kate has a rare disease. If she doesn't get an injection, she will die. She is very young and super wants to live. But she is also super afraid of injections. Every time Kate goes to the hospital for an injection, when the doctor approaches with the needle, she says, oh my, let's not do it this time. I'm super scared, I'm going home first. It's like this every time. But after going home, she is very annoyed because not getting the injection really means death. Okay, the problem lies in how we determine what Kate's true desire is. Is it the desire to live, or the desire to avoid the injection? Hey, the standard of distinction lies in that we can observe a person's other actions to determine what this person truly desires. Take Kate for example. Although every time she goes to the hospital for an injection, she runs away because of fear of the needle. But we have to look at what Kate does at other times and other occasions. For example, after she escapes home, she beats her chest and stamps her feet, falling into deep remorse every time. Hey, for example, every now and then Kate goes to church to pray to God, hoping to be healthy forever. For another example, Kate reposts "Faith makes me healthy and long-lived" every day. Although these behaviors might not help achieve her goal. But compared to Kate's refusal at the hospital, Kate wants to live in more occasions and for longer periods. So this more occasions and longer periods is enough to judge that the desire to live is Kate's true desire, right? This also aligns very well with our common sense. That is, the desire we truly want is that long-term desire, not the momentary pleasure before our eyes. Right? As the saying goes, momentary pleasure before the eyes, empty melancholy after the pleasure. And this empty melancholy is the sense of remorse produced after the lack of self-control. So in the end, Hume's diagnosis of the cause of lack of self-control is that a conflict occurred between the true desire and the immediate desire. If the immediate desire defeats the true desire, the condition of lack of self-control occurs. Okay, having finished Hume's diagnosis of the cause, now it's time to prescribe the medicine. If the cause of lack of self-control is the overshadowing of the true desire by the immediate desire, then the prescription Hume would prescribe is to remove the tyranny of the immediate desire over us. Let the long-term true desire lead our actions. But never forget, Hume's basic stance is sentimentalism, emotivism. Whether it is immediate desire or true desire, they are just emotions. This is not saying true desire is more rational. An immediate desire is more perceptual. No, both are emotions. Reason has no role in this. So unlike rationalists like Socrates and Plato, to overcome lack of self-control is not standing there reasoning with yourself. Reasoning doesn't get through. Instead, you have to use the emotion of fear of death to defeat, for example, the emotion of gluttony. Simply put, don't try to convince with reason, but move with emotion. So how do you make one emotion defeat another emotion? Hey, regarding this, Hume proposed 3 psychological rules to judge. If conflicting emotions appear, which emotion will win the conflict? And thereby be able to drive human action. One rule is called the winner-takes-all principle. Actually, this is a mechanism at the bottom layer. It means that between different emotions, a winner must ultimately be decided. The one that wins in the end will drive human action. And the one that loses will be swallowed up and disappear, right? You can't simultaneously be afraid of death and eat sweets, then you'd be schizophrenic, right? This is a bottom layer mechanism, winner takes all. So specifically, which emotion will win? Mainly look at the following 2 rules. The second rule is called the habit principle. It says that if an emotion is a familiar emotion to you, and you have experienced this emotion many times, then this emotion is more likely to win the struggle, thereby driving your action. Right? Humans doing habitual repetitive actions is always very easy, it's easy to do. The third rule is called the vividness principle. It says that if an emotion can form a particularly vivid image in your mind, it is visualized. Hey, then this emotion is more likely to win the struggle. For example, should you donate this money to the poor person downstairs, or to the poor person in Africa? Most people will choose to donate to the one downstairs, right? Because your feeling for the poor person downstairs is more direct and fresher. Okay, we already know the 3 principles of emotional struggle. Now what we need to do is make good use of these 3 principles to cultivate our true desires. Let it be able to win against the immediate desire and the struggle. Let's talk about this vividness principle first. Think about it. Why does our immediate desire often defeat our true desire, thereby triggering the condition of lack of self-control? Mainly because this true desire is often long-term and not vivid enough. While the sweets in front of us, the sexy girls in the short videos we encounter right now are very concrete. So what we need to do is to make the long-term true desire vivid as well. Let the self in this very moment feel it vividly. For example, when you are studying, you can't help but want to swipe through short videos. You have to use this vividness principle to imagine the desire to study very vividly. Right? For example, imagine after you get a high score on the exam, hey, you can get into a good university. Just imagine the scene of running freely on the grass of the university campus, right? Does not the ancient Eastern proverb also say, in books, there are golden houses, in books, there are faces like jade, meaning success and beauty come from study? Think more about golden houses and faces like jade, and you might have more motivation to study. And precisely because the true desire is often a long-term desire. So we have to let ourselves view the current action from a long-term perspective. For example, there is a so-called October 10th, 10 rule popular now. That is when you are in a situation of lack of self-control. For example, when you are struggling whether to study or swipe through short videos. Hey, at this time you might as well jump out and try to imagine 3 10s. That is, if you decide to do one of them, how will you view this decision 10 minutes later? How will you view this decision 10 months later? And how will you view this decision 10 years later? This October 10th, 10 rule, in the end, is to let you break away from the immediate desire and view your own actions from the perspective of a long-term desire. Additionally, when you want to counter an immediate desire, for example, you can't help but want to smoke, hey, you also have to apply the vividness principle. Associate the desire to smoke with a bad image. This is why many cigarette packs now print pictures of lungs rotted from lung cancer to scare smokers. Is this similar? You imagine the sexy girl in the short video as a big silly goose, right? Big silly goose, what are you doing here? Then you might feel that the face like jade in the book is more beautiful and moving, right? Okay, having finished principle 3, let's talk about principle 2. We can use the habit principle to cultivate our true desires. This is a bit like what Aristotle said, the cultivation of virtue starts from small things. Slowly cultivating a sense of familiarity. For example, you have a fear of speaking in public. Even for very important speeches, you always flee at the last minute. Just like Kate who is afraid of injections. Then you first find your parents or wife and children to give a speech to them. Then, hey, find a few friends and give a speech to them. When you gradually cultivate a familiarity with public speaking, and it becomes a habit. Then when you face dozens or hundreds of people to give a speech, you will be more at ease, more accustomed to it. When, through the vividness principle and habit principle, you cultivate your long-term desire into a more dominant emotion. Then according to principle 1, winner takes all principle. Things like stage fright, smoking, swiping short videos, eating sweets. These short-term desires will be excluded. Your long-term desire will be able to dominate your will and drive your action. This way you can overcome the lack of self-control. In short, according to Hume's plan, move with emotion, not convince with reason. You need to treat yourself like a little baby. Can you reason with a little baby? You can't. You have to coax him or scare him, so this little baby can grow up healthy. Okay, having introduced Hume's diagnosis and prescription. Next, let's invite the next doctor, Sigmund Freud. The form taken by our episode today is an expert consultation. Of course, this is more of a metaphor, comparing philosophers to doctors of human thought. But among these philosophers appearing today, there really is a doctor. This is Freud. Freud, personally, was originally a neurologist. He later gradually transformed into a philosopher or thinker. His later theories were all founded on the basis of his early clinical experience. Okay, let's listen to this Freud, who seriously worked as a doctor, in his diagnosis of the cause of lack of self-control. Of course, just like the previous philosophers. To clarify Freud's diagnosis of the cause of lack of self-control, we still have to understand the basic concepts of Freud's theory. Of course, Freud is the founder of a school of psychology. That is, the founder of the school of psychoanalysis. His specific psychological theories have received a lot of criticism in today's mainstream empirical psychology community. But we have to say, Freud is a thinker. The influence of Freudian thought is immense. Some scholars comment that Freudianism is one of the most influential thoughts of the 20th century. Its status is second only to Marxism and Darwinism. We look at the latter two. The reason they have immense influence is because their theories are revolutionary, overturning tradition and opening up a new worldview for humanity. Freud is the same. His theory is also revolutionary. He brought two major reversals to the Western intellectual world regarding the view of humans. The first reversal, in a sense, inherited Hume's reversal of ethical intellectualism. However, Freud pushed this anti-rationalism to an extreme. With Hume, it wasn't human reason guiding humans, but human emotion guiding humans. With Freud, what guides humans is deep inside their hearts. Those unknown and indescribable primal desires. These instincts are mainly sexual instincts and aggressive instincts. That is, seeing good food and wanting to eat. Seeing beautiful sexy girls and wanting to go up and reproduce with her. Seeing potential sexual competitors and wanting to go up and beat him to death. In short, very erotic and very violent. Freud called these primal instincts libido. And it is precisely this erotic and violent libido that is driving your actions. Hearing this, you might not agree. I am a very pure and healthy person. Saying those erotic and violent instincts are driving my actions. I definitely cannot agree, right? We all grew up receiving good moral education. My brain fundamentally wouldn't think about those erotic and violent things. How can you talk about them dominating my actions? Hey, this brings us to the second major reversal Freud brought to Western thought. It can also be said to be a more important reversal. That is proposing an important concept, the unconscious. Simply put, is what you think really what you think? You have to know, the things that truly drive our actions. The vast majority are unconscious. They are things your own reason has not consciously realized. And this is the famous iceberg model. It says the human mental structure is like an iceberg. What humans consciously realize is only the small part floating above the water. Below the water, there is a huge part, which is the unconscious. The unconscious is what you don't know, but it concretely dominates your actions. Hey, why can't we ourselves consciously realize our motives for action? That is because inside your mental structure, there is a defense mechanism. The task of this defense mechanism is to prevent those indescribable primal instincts deep in your heart from being consciously realized by you. What is this equivalent to? This is equivalent to a sensor living in your heart. And you, who can consciously perceive the tip of the iceberg above water, are just an audience member. This sensor is reviewing all kinds of indescribable, erotic, and violent videos uploaded from the back end at all times. But sometimes this sensor is too busy to take down those indescribable videos. But at least he can send them back to let the uploader change the title. Hey, for example, change it to something like learning fashion knowledge. Hey, then it can pass the review. Then, as the audience, when you see this title, hey, you click open this video. Actually, deep in your heart, you just want to swipe videos of sexy girls. But you will always throw out the triple denial. I am not, I didn't, don't talk nonsense. I am just here in the knowledge section to learn knowledge. Right? And the work of this sensor is also carried out unconsciously. And at this conscious level, you really believe you are here in the knowledge section to learn knowledge. Simply put, after you lied to yourself, you didn't even know you lied to yourself. Hey, why do we lie to ourselves? The fundamental reason is that there isn't just one you. Speaking of this, we have to introduce the famous structural model of personality proposed by Freud. That is the ID, ego, and superego. Let's talk about this ego first. According to our traditional understanding, this ego is usually seen as Descartes' cogito, I think, right? Descartes said I think, therefore I am. Descartes believed that our own perception of the thoughts in our hearts. This first-person self-perception is direct, clear, and transparent, right? Simply put, don't I know what I'm thinking in my own heart? Hey, you really don't know. The content that this ego consciously realizes is just the tip of the iceberg. And this content is processed and distorted. This distortion is the product of the mutual pulling of two forces. First is one force, which is the ID. This ID is some of the most primal instincts of humans we mentioned before, including sexual instincts and aggressive instincts, those erotic and violent things. This ID is a most fundamental driving force of human action. It manifests as humans having an impulse at all times. That is what was just said, seeing good food and wanting to eat. Seeing pretty sexy girls and wanting to go up and reproduce with her. Seeing potential sexual competitors and wanting to go up and beat him to death, this impulse. To use Freud's words, the ID is a boiling cauldron. It always seeks release. But you won't really go up and reproduce with a sexy girl when you see one. Right? Why? Because there is another force pulling at the ego. This is the superego. The superego is a set of moral indoctrinations. It encourages the ego to establish defense mechanisms to counter the ID. You have to be a person who has broken away from vulgar tastes. You have to learn knowledge. Don't swipe through videos of sexy girls. This superego is constructed around an internalized image of parents. Right? Just every time you are about to do something unhealthy. At this time, you suddenly think, how would my mom and dad view what I am doing right now? Instantly you will feel, how could I be this kind of person, right? This entanglement between ID, ego, and superego is also unconscious. So under the influence of the superego, the ego establishes a set of defense mechanisms to counter the ID. The ultimate consequence is that your instinctual impulses are always repressed. Actually, Freud's theory of instinct repression is highly correlated with a person's childhood experiences. Especially correlated with the experience of childhood sexuality being repressed. Of course, the childhood sexuality Freud talks about here is divided into 3 stages. The oral stage, anal stage, and phallic stage. Developing continuously from birth to 6 years old. The sexual expression of the oral stage is sucking on the mother's nipple. Then, it's the anal stage. The sexual expression at this time is liking to excrete freely anytime, anywhere. Finally, sexuality gradually shifts to the genitals, shifting from autoeroticism to object love. This means that originally when you were just born, you were a little baby. This little baby was completely dominated by the ID. Completely letting the self go, wantonly releasing its own instinctual impulses. Doing whatever it wants. Wanting mother to breastfeed when hungry, excreting anywhere when wanting to excrete. But later as you grew up, parents no longer allowed you to let yourself go and squander instincts like this. For example, you can no longer always suck on mother's nipple. For example, you must urinate and defecate at specified times and places. In short, you have to follow rules. If you don't follow rules, you will be punished by parents. For example, this little boy will have a strong anxiety of being castrated by his father. So he learns to behave. We said before, this superego is an internalized image of parents. So under the influence of this superego, an ego with a defense system is finally established. So the establishment of the ego is accompanied by the repression of your instincts. So what consequences will long-term repression of instincts have? Of course, regarding this, Freud listed a lot. Like projection, fixation, sublimation, regression, reaction formation, etc., etc. We don't need to talk about such complex things in our program. Actually, the principle is simple. Like a boiling cauldron. If you always keep it tight and don't let it release, what consequences will occur? It's either you can't hold it, and it explodes. Or you hold it, but it transfers to another channel to release. The situation of not being able to hold it is easy to understand. It's that your ID just wants to swipe through sexy girl videos. But your ego, under the influence of the superego, holds on tight. I am here in the knowledge section to learn philosophy, to learn psychology. I want to watch philosophy videos, I want to watch psychology videos. But in the end, you still can't hold it. While watching philosophy videos, you end up swiping to sexy girl videos. However, although you didn't hold it, your superego won't disappear because of this. Your defense mechanism will create a strong sense of remorse in your ego afterwards. Oh my, I was clearly here in the knowledge section to learn philosophy. Why did I start swiping through sexy girl videos? Why can't I control myself? I'm such a piece of trash. This sense of regret afterwards is brought by the superego. Okay, that's the situation of not holding it. Then what is the situation of holding it but transferring? For example, you clearly know that smoking is harmful to health. The doctor also advised you not to smoke. But you still can't control yourself and want to smoke. Interpreting with a kind of Freudianism, you can't control your desire to smoke. Actually, when you were a child going through the oral stage, you didn't go through it well. For example, hey, your dad snatched your mom away. Your instinct to suck on your mother's nipple was repressed. This repressed sexuality from childhood will stay stuck deep in your heart. Until after you become an adult. This repressed childhood desire for the mother's nipple is released in another way. That is the desire to suck on cigarettes. Of course, this repression and then transfer is also carried out unconsciously. You think you are addicted to tobacco. Actually, this is just compensating for your lack in the oral stage. Of course, whether it is not holding it and releasing, or holding it and transferring. The bottom layer mechanism of these two is actually the same. It is that your instinct was repressed and wants to try every way to release. But this process of repression and release is completely unconscious. Therefore, when you finally perform some unconscious action to release, in the principles you can consciously realize, you fundamentally cannot understand yourself. Why did I do this? Making you look confused like, I don't understand. This is what we call the separation of knowledge and action, lack of self-control. Among them, there is an extreme condition. That is hysteria. It is where a certain part of the body, in the sense of pathological anatomy, is not damaged at all, but functions disorderly, or simply malfunctions. For example, the left hand inexplicably cannot be lifted, or the eyes inexplicably cannot see things, or the whole body simply becomes paralyzed, twitching all over and rolling on the ground. So this hysteria belongs to an extreme condition of lack of self-control where one cannot control oneself. Actually, in this sense, every one of us is a hysteria patient, just varying in degree. Because every one of our instincts is repressed. We are all unconsciously releasing our repressed instincts. In this sense, every one of us is also a person lacking self-control. We all perform some actions that we cannot understand in principle to release our repressed instincts. Because in the end, we actually don't know ourselves. Our most essential self is unconscious. Okay, having finished Freud's diagnosis of the cause. Next, let's talk about the prescription he prescribed. Since things that are easily explained at the unconscious level are made to look like I don't understand at your conscious level due to the ego's defense mechanism, then how to treat your symptom of lack of self-control? The principle is simple. It is to let those entanglements in your unconscious level rise to the conscious level. Once you understand your entanglements in the unconscious level at the conscious level, your symptoms will be eliminated. This is actually still doing a job of knowing yourself. Of course, this psychoanalysis is a clinical job. We are just talking about the concept here. As for the specific clinical operations of seeking medical advice in medicine, everyone has to spend money to lie on a couch and have talk therapy with an analyst. So to let the entanglements of the unconscious level rise to the conscious level, the biggest enemy is the defense mechanism, right? We said before that the job the defense mechanism does is to prevent the content of the unconscious level from rising to the conscious level. So the important work of psychoanalysis is to break through the defense mechanism's shielding of your unconscious content. So our breakthrough? The main method is talk therapy. It is treating through conversation between the analyst and the patient. And this talk therapy was pioneered by Freud. Now that the psychological counseling industry has developed so largely, this is all the rice bowl given by the Grandmaster Freud. One important talk therapy method is called free association. It is in a dimly lit small room. You lie on a sofa or recliner. The analyst sits behind you. Then you say whatever comes to your mind, without any filtering. Just like you are a traveler sitting by the window of a fast-moving train. You report whatever scenery flashes past the window. The analyst is to guide the patient to bypass the defense mechanism by encouraging the patient to report any fleeting thoughts without filtering, to find the crux hidden in the unconscious. As the chat goes on, the door of memory is gradually opened. Those messy things experienced in childhood all rush to the heart, right? Ultimately, most will be linked to childhood sexual repression. Finally, you discover, for example, the reason why you can't control yourself and want to swipe through short videos while studying is because deep in your heart, you fundamentally don't believe you will become a learned person. You are subconsciously finding excuses for your failure. And the fundamental crux lies in, for example, when you were a child asking your mother about something. She always wouldn't tell you, always ignored you, right? When you realize the fundamental crux, you cry your eyes out. Consequently, the symptom of swiping short videos while studying disappears immediately. Of course, I'm saying it very lightly here. The concept of psychoanalysis is simple. But it is a practical clinical job. Because this defense mechanism is very hard to bypass. The effect of your ego level's triple denial is very strong. In this psychoanalysis, it's not saying that the analyst has rich clinical experience and sees the patient's crux at a glance through conversation with the patient, and then tells this crux directly to the patient and the illness is cured. Telling is useless. This only lets the patient know this crux and knowledge, in principle. This cannot eliminate the symptom. This still belongs to the condition of knowing but not acting. To truly eliminate the symptom, the patient must have a true knowing of their unconscious content. To let the patient themselves, as the conversation unfolds, feel this crux and experience. So usually it ends with crying one's eyes out. This is the patient truly feeling the crux inside their unconscious. This is a true knowing of the unconscious content. So, the analyst telling the patient directly is useless. Instead, it requires guiding the patient through conversation to feel their own unconscious content themselves. So psychoanalysis is an art. Of course, including the interpretation of dreams, the interpretation of slips of the tongue, are all treatment methods of psychoanalysis. Because in sleep, the efficacy of the defense mechanism is not that strong. Because its distortion of your unconscious content is not that severe. It can leave some clues for you to explore the unconscious. Of course, there are some specific operations that we won't talk about much, including things like the patient's transference to the analyst. One moment treating the analyst as dad, another moment treating the analyst as mom. And then, the handling of this patient's transference to the analyst itself is psychoanalytic treatment for the patient. In short, the main task of psychoanalysis is to guide the patient through conversation to bypass the defense mechanism. To be able to consciously realize various entanglements in one's own unconscious, thereby alleviating this hysteria of lack of self-control. This is the prescription Freud prescribed for lack of self-control. Okay, having finished Freud's diagnosis and his prescription. Next, let's enter the meeting summary of this expert consultation on the problem of lack of self-control. In this ultimate thought experiment episode, we explored 5 diagnoses for the problem of lack of self-control and their corresponding solutions. To summarize briefly, the keyword for Socrates' diagnosis of the cause of lack of self-control is lack of knowledge. That is ignorance. The so-called clearly knowing but not being able to do only shows that you did not truly know. Knowing but not acting is simply not knowing. As long as you truly know, you will inevitably be able to do. So based on this diagnosis, the keyword for the prescription Socrates prescribed is learning knowledge. After you truly know this knowledge, practicing this knowledge is good and will bring you pleasure. Thus, the problem of lack of self-control will not exist. The keyword for Plato's diagnosis of lack of self-control is desire tyranny. The so-called knowing but not acting is because the reason in your soul is overshadowed by desire. Therefore, the keyword for the prescription Plato prescribed is becoming a philosopher. You need to cultivate your own soul structure into this philosopher-style soul structure where reason dominates spirit and desire, letting you have an erotic love for reason, thereby achieving harmony between reason and desire, realizing the unity of knowledge and action. The keyword for Aristotle's diagnosis of lack of self-control is knowledge dormancy. It is because your desire snatched the major premise of your practical syllogism, consequently snatching the memory, making your knowledge not called up, being in a dormant state. So, how to make knowledge easy to call up? The keyword for the prescription Aristotle prescribed is cultivating habits. It requires constantly doing things to internalize knowledge into a stable quality and habit. This way the calling of knowledge will be as smooth and free as invoking a shortcut. Then arriving at the modern era. The keyword for Hume's diagnosis of the cause of lack of self-control is emotional conflict. The so-called lack of self-control is not a struggle between reason and emotion. Reason is merely the slave of emotion. Lack of self-control is a struggle between emotion and emotion. And it is caused by an immediate emotional desire defeating a long-term emotional desire. So the keyword for the prescription Hume prescribed is moving with emotion. Unlike ethical intellectualists, the sentimentalist Hume's scheme for treating lack of self-control is not convincing with reason, but moving with emotion. We must follow the 3 psychological principles to cultivate our long-term desires, enabling it to defeat the immediate short-term desires. The keyword for Freud's diagnosis of lack of self-control is instinct repression. Our unconscious ID, under the influence of the superego, is repressed by the ego's defense mechanism. And the ID always seeks release. And this process of release is also unconscious. Therefore, we always perform release actions that our conscious awareness cannot understand. Separation of knowledge and action. Therefore, the keyword for the prescription Freud prescribed is psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis is letting those repressions and entanglements inside our unconscious rise to the conscious level, to be consciously understood by us. This way the symptom of lack of self-control can be alleviated. Among these 5 diagnoses and corresponding prescriptions introduced in this episode, that is, does the knowing in principle still have, or how much guiding role does it have for our practical activities, that is, doing? And how should we treat ourselves? How should we conduct ourselves? Do we see ourselves as a little partner in rational dialogue? Or treat ourselves as a little monkey? We invite you to participate in the discussion of this big question together with the philosophers. Their views have been expressed. Now it's your turn to speak. Please express your views in the comment section below. Thoughts? If you've watched until now, please like, subscribe, and share. This is very important to our channel. See you next time. Good night.